Welcome to everyone to our panel called Artountability that explores the perspectives and synergies on art, society, and technology. This panel has been organized in collaboration with Aurelio Rioux in University of St. Gallen and also Christoph Lutz from the Nordic Center in BI, and also from me, Eduard Fosch-Villaronga, that I work at Leiden University. I'm so glad to be here today with you, but I'm very, very sad that we cannot be in Brussels because amazing things happen in conferences. The origin of this panel, for instance, started in 2018 when we were with Christoph in a conference that organized in Haifa, and there we used the painting of Las Meninas of Velázquez, for instance, to talk about transparency and to highlight the idea that you can be seeing without really knowing. And well, then we saw an amazing presentation from Shirley Ogola and Piera Riccio on the future of work that kept us thinking and thinking until another colleague, Luis Escarcella, said, arte, we need more arte in our lives. And somehow we all agreed. And here we are today, one step forward in the pursuit of the inclusion of arte, as the Italians would say, focusing on artistic perspectives on algorithmic accountability. And for today, we brought together amazing speakers from different backgrounds and also different nations to talk about the interplay of art, society, and technology, algorithmic accountability and art, and also art education and responsibility. We have also three moderators that will in due time introduce to each of the speakers. And now we will start with the first cluster, and Chris will take the first word.
Thank you, Eduard, and welcome from my side. I will be responsible for the first 20 minutes of the session, and we have two amazing speakers for the first 20 minutes. We have Peter Booth. Peter is an associate professor at BI Norwegian Business School. He's connected to the Nordic Center for Internet and Society and the Center for Creative Industries, and his research broadly covers the sociology of art and finance, artist labor, and the impact of technologies on the arts and museum sectors. And within these areas, Peter is published in different outlets. And before being in academia, Peter worked in finance, and also very importantly for this panel, Peter also is an artist. So he not only writes about art, but he also has the practical access as an artist to the topic. And then Peter and Fiona will share their presentation for the first 10 or 12 minutes or so. Fiona Mcdermott is our second speaker. She's a researcher based at Connect, the Research Centre for Future Communications and Networks at Trinity College Dublin, so based in Ireland, and her research explores the social and cultural implications of data-driven technologies, especially in cities. So she focuses on urban governance and smart cities. She has a background in architecture and urban design and has worked in the sector in various countries, including Germany, the UK, and Denmark. So within the panel, Peter and Fiona will give an input presentation on the EU project Arts Formation. This is a Horizon 2020 project that is currently running and investigating the intersection of the arts, technology, and the digital transformation. So without further ado, I will hand over the floor to Peter and Fiona for the first presentation.
Could we start with the first slide, please? I just wanted to begin by just thanking Eduard, Christoph, and the conference organizers and panelists for the opportunity to say a few brief words about the Arts Formation project. I know Fiona's also got to talk about it, so hopefully we can combine some of our ideas. If we go to the next slide, please. So perhaps the starting point, what is Arts Formation? Arts Formation is a research project exploring the intersection between art, society, and technology. We aim to understand, analyze, and promote the ways in which the arts can reinforce social, cultural, economic, and political benefits of digital transformation. Just as a quick sort of introduction, I've listed some of our partner organizations on the project. In terms of academic partners, there's BIA, Norwegian Business School, Copenhagen Business School, Trinity College, Dublin. We also have a number of artist and civil society partners, VAG Society in the Netherlands, LATRA in Greece, KIA, European Affairs in Belgium, Transmedial in Germany, the Foundation for Art and Creative Technology in Great Britain, and European Alternatives in France. If we could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so just to sort of frame what arts formation is essentially about, the project responds to the four research questions that I've presented here. Firstly, what's the role of the arts in digital society? Secondly, how can business mobilize the arts to tackle societal problems related to digital transformation? Thirdly, how does civil society mobilize the arts to catalyze social change, foster civic participation, and strengthen the democratic processes endangered by digital transformation? And lastly, and I think this is related to the funding, how can the arts inform and shape a digital policy making? Could we go to the next slide, please? So I'm just going to talk, just mention a couple of things about the first study that I was involved in, and that was basically investigating the transformative potential of the arts, and in particular in relation to digital transformation or transformation of digitized society. So I think it's important to understand the role that the arts may play in digital transformation. We need to begin with the idea that the arts is a pharmacon, which is to say that the arts can be both a cure for the ills of technology, but they can also be a poison which accentuates some of the destructive elements of tech. It accentuates the destructive elements of digital technologies. Mirroring Adorno and Horkheimer's idea, the poisonous pole of the arts is enacted when the arts take the form of culture industry, which entrenches consumerism by refunctioning the aesthetic dimension towards the production of consumers, and by rendering producer and consumer knowledge obsolete. On the other hand, the curative pole of the arts is linked to the forms of participation that the arts facilitates, and it lies in encouraging our often dominant use of noetic acting or sensory experience. And this is something closer to the Kantian idea of aesthetics or aesthetic experience. And I put this a little image here of an artwork which I think gives an idea of how art can be both curative and poisonous at the same time. So this is an artwork by Adam Harvey, part of this project called CV Dazzle. CV Dazzle explores how fashion can be used to camouflage from face detection technology. Now, if we want to understand this artwork in terms of how it activates the curative pole, we can think about that the work brings an awareness to issues of privacy, and it also offers a form of active resistance through camouflage. But the same work also can be said to activate art's poisonous pole. The academic Tony Monahan writes specifically of this work, not only does this preserve structural inequalities and current surveillance practices, but it also invites the production of augmented surveillance applications to counter deception and avoidance. And talking of this type of art, sort of fashion-orientated camouflaging, he writes, they offer hyper-individualized and consumer-orientated adaptations to undesired surveillance. Next slide, please. So the transformative role of the arts can be basically, understanding the arts as something that can be a pharmacon. It is, it's critical to try and activate the arts curative pole. And as a sort of brief mapping of the processes by which the arts can affect transformation, we identify four key areas. Firstly, art as a therapy. It captures the idea that art contains self-knowledge that can help to heal by causing pain and discomfort. In doing so, art can evoke a sense of awe, wonder, and enchantment that is depleted by digital entertainment, consumption, ways of work, and so forth. In simple terms, technology re-enchantment means recapturing a sense of wonder and mystery associated with the way that humans and technologies interact. Secondly, art as care manifests when art facilitates circuits of care for others and care for oneself. Art may foster community psychology, raise consciousness of community relevant issues, and plays a pedagogical role in knowledge transfer. How does art do this in relation to technology? It does so by enabling participation in open source and maker communities, acting as an agent in building and strengthening participative communities, bringing digital justices and contradictions to light. Thirdly, art, in terms of imagination, art's ability to transform digital society can be distilled down to its unencumbered and free-thinking approach and potential for generating tacit or practical knowledge. And lastly, in terms of capabilities, arts can transform digital society by nudging, educating, calling for, and enabling forms of social participation that enhance digital citizenship. So we don't propose that these four categories are exhaustive, but we suggest that they capture some of the dominant processes by which the art can play a role in digital transformation. I think in terms of time, I should wrap it up there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So just let me know when I can.
Let's go to Fiona.
Okay, great. I'll jump right in. I'm going to talk a little bit about a subsection of the Arts Formation project, and specifically in relation to the interplay between the arts and enterprise. Just a little quick note on the word enterprise. I use it as a broad term to include different forms of commercial organizations, so large industry players to small businesses, and particularly in the context of those that are involved with the digital transformation. And I also want to just acknowledge that this work that I'm going to speak about has been done in collaboration with colleagues at the Copenhagen Business School and also other colleagues in Trinity here. So first of all, what is the reason for focusing on arts and enterprise? I think most people here will be familiar with the fact that although the impact of contemporary technology is felt across all sections of society, in many cases the changes are driven by enterprise, and in particular by private technology companies. So it's within this context that we're looking at how artistic practices can be used to help direct technology towards larger societal benefit. But in order to understand this role and the impact of the arts, we first need to look at the variety of relationship models that are currently in practice. I think most people will be familiar with artist in residence programs, and on the right here I show Patrick McRae has a new book out, Making Art Work, which is all about arts and engineering businesses collaboration. So there's a lineage that runs from the arts and technology group with artists like Robert Rauschenberg collaborating with engineers in Bell Labs, and there's a whole kind of suite of these initiatives that took place in the 60s and 70s, and interestingly 50 years later we see Bell Labs and Google and Facebook kind of take up these initiatives again. So I'm going to describe three different types of relationships, and the first relationship has to do with these kind of formal residencies. So since 2012, there's a number of technology companies have initiated programs that formally bring artists into contact with their organizations. So Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Adobe, Autodesk, Nokia Bell Labs have all initiated these programs, and they generally consist of short-term residencies in which the artist is invited into the physical space of the company to work in close relation with the working practices and technologies of the enterprise. And despite some similarities, there's also a great level of difference between them in their aims and the expectations placed on the different parties, in the reception and in their critiques that they receive from within enterprises and amongst the public. So I'm just going to speak about two of these. So on the left, you see the architect Jenny Sabine, who conducted an artist in residence program with Microsoft Research. And they described their artist in residence program as being a collaboration between researchers and artists working with new and emerging technologies that are not yet available to the public. It's designed to influence culture within the company, and the program merges the strength of art with deep cutting scientific research to expand audiences' understanding of humanity as the rightful center of technology. That's a direct quote about their own program. And on the right, I've kind of shown Facebook to the Facebook Artist in Residence program to kind of contrast with that, whereas it has no mechanism for interaction with the technology used by Facebook or the technical staff who produce it. Instead, for Facebook Artist in Residence, the primary focus is the production of works owned by Facebook and for the Facebook offices. It's almost exclusively acritical with respect to the enterprise itself. And Fred Turner, the media scholar, points to the fact that the program is positioned as representing an image of the company publicly and to workers that is at odds with the reality of Facebook's business activities. In particular, the focus on art practice that promotes social justice issues is seen as directly in opposition to the company's reputation and policies. The next kind of type of relationship that we've been looking at, we describe as consulting, and it's basically the provision of art services and artistic-based methods to enterprises in the form of consultancy. So from the 1980s onwards, you see business and management thinking increasingly becoming used. Business and management increasingly using art as a tool to bring generative and subversive thinking into organizations. The ability to work creatively, to improvise, and to experiment with new ideas and concepts. Historically, the remit of artists is now high demand, highly valued skill in management and leadership. And this is something that Elvia Wilk has written about in eFlux, the different kind of types of artist and consultant. And on the right, I show some documentation from a colleague of mine in Trinity, who is an artist, but was hired as a consultant by Vodafone, who are a large telecommunications company, to kind of rethink their branding. So they were changing the business model and also changing their branding to this logo called "The Future is Exciting, Ready." So she was brought in as a creative writer and an artist to kind of help them reimagine this shift and to kind of think about it in a more playful way. And finally, the last category we've been looking at, we've kind of framed as embedding. And it really kind of represents examples that don't really fit so neatly into the boundaries where the artist and enterprise are neatly defined. So they're much more kind of diffuse and fuzzy examples. But we kind of see them as being very informative in understanding the possibilities of art and enterprise engagements, as they contain much more often much more experimental models. So here I show two examples. People might be familiar with Datamart, which was a project in Hamburg. And within these examples, we're really interested in ideas of value and exchange. So this project, it wasn't a formal enterprise, but it really looked at new ways of understanding value as produced through data and the exchange models that exist and how they could differ. And the other example is Fairphone, which again, it's a commercial endeavor, but it proposes new ways of looking at how the resources and power relations and the production of the technology is produced, while also kind of forefronting the materiality of it. So these artistic and entrepreneurial practices raise a number of questions about when an artist is doing art or when they are doing something else. It also raises questions about the role of the individual enterprises within wider socioeconomic systems and proposes new ways of thinking about and acting in the world of enterprise. So just very briefly to end, a few of the kind of further directions we're going to look at is kind of acknowledging, firstly, kind of looking at the asymmetric relationships. So acknowledging that in collaborations between artists and enterprise, it is asymmetric, and the intentions are very different on behalf of the both parties. Similarly, in terms of understanding the metrics of success, what might be success for an enterprise in terms of visibility. So maybe it's a very kind of public-facing project with like spectacular kind of outputs might not mean success for the artist, and vice versa. Maybe the artist is interested in kind of initiating a change of culture within the organization, and that might not mean success for the organization. And then finally, that these collaborations kind of come inherently with a number of constraints. And I'll leave it there because I'm pretty sure I've gone over time.
Thank you very much for the great presentation. Okay. So we don't have time for questions, or do we have time for? Okay, I'm sorry, but
okay.
Hopefully at the end we have maybe a time for a few questions. But then I hand over to the second session. Okay.
All right. Can I take over?
Yes.
Yes, really.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm very, very honored to be able to introduce to you the two next great speakers that we have. First, Marange Villarenca. She has a background in cultural and media sciences and is now a lecturer as well as a PhD student at Utrecht University, where she is also affiliated with the Data Field Society research platform. Her current research focuses on algorithmic accountability in especially Dutch municipalities. And her profile quote states that transparency in AI is a prerequisite for accountability. If you don't know what's going on in an algorithmic system, you can't be responsible for it. And we look very forward to hear more about how she connects transparency, accountability, and then later also art during the panel discussion. Now in the panel, she will introduce a project in which she co-designs with other practitioners a tool, like an actual practical tool to foster algorithmic accountability. And the project is called BIAS, which stands for, and I'm trying to pronounce the G's correctly, it's Beraadslagingsinstrument voor algorithmic systeem, but I'm sure Maranke, you will tell us again what it is. And I'll introduce the second speaker afterwards. Maranke, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So just waiting for the slides to come up. Yes, here we go. So thank you very much. I'm happy to be here. I'll just delve right in because time is short. So algorithmic systems are increasingly being used in the public sector, and that raises questions about delegation to these systems. And these are questions of transparency, but mostly of accountability. And indeed, civil servants often lack practical tools to give account of their algorithms. So where do we start? Let's just start at the basics. So what is algorithmic accountability? Well, when I started, that term was quite ill-defined. So what I did was a literature review, which I presented elsewhere. And that literature review, as a starting point, so it was quite expensive. It was 242 articles, but I'll not delve into that. But as kind of the basics, let's just look at the terminology first. So algorithms, for me, are heterogeneous and diffuse socio-technical systems. So I'm not just talking about the technical algorithm. I'm really looking at these technical things embedded within social practice, within culture, and so forth. So accountability, I really depart here from public administration. So accountability for me is a relationship between an actor and a forum in which the actor has an obligation to explain and to justify his or her conduct, in which the forum can pose questions and pass judgment, and the actor may face consequences. Now, you may wonder at this point, so what is algorithmic accountability then, if we have these terms? Well, this was what came out of the huge systematic literature review. I'll read it out loud for you because it's quite quite long. Sorry about that. So algorithmic accountability concerns a networked account for a socio-technical algorithmic system following the various stages of the system's life cycle. In this accountability relationship, multiple actors have the obligation to explain and justify their use, design, and/or decisions of or concerning the system and the subsequent effects of that conduct. As different kinds of actors are in play during the life of the system, they may be held to account by various types of fora, either for particular aspects of the system or for the entirety of the system. Such fora must be able to pose questions and pass judgment, after which one or several actors may face consequences. The relationship between forum and actor departs from a particular perspective on accountability. Okay, so there we have that, but that's all very theoretical, of course. And what I really like to do in my PhD research is really move from theory to practice. So what I'm doing, I'm actually what we call participatory action research. So I'm very much working together with people on this topic. So I work with a lot of civil servants. I really try to engage with them. So I'm not so much a passive bystander, but I really try to engage with them. And together we're co-designing a practical toolkit that will really help them in their work to foster algorithmic accountability. So what does that look like? Well, it's this at the moment. It's called BIAS, Beraadslagingsinstrument voor Algoritmische Systemen, or Basic Inquiry into Algorithmic Systems. I think my slides are mismatching at this point. Oh, there we go. And it's basically a practical combination of my PhD research. And the goal is really to enhance reflection and accountability about algorithmic systems and to formalize and streamline discussions between civil servants. So what does that look like? Well, what actually goes into this design? So the first part was the systematic literature review. The second part is a case study. So I really looked closely into the SIRI case, the system risk indicator. The third one is actually what I'm doing right now. So I'm extracting design criteria by talking to civil servants, by doing field work with them, and really trying to hear what do they need in their practice to help make sense of and account for algorithmic systems. And finally, we're prototyping. So that means a lot of, getting your hands dirty and actually making stuff. And then really see and talk with them if what we've designed is actually helpful for them, and then tweak and adapt and so on. So, so we're currently at this third stage. So it's not there yet. We don't really know at this point what it will look like because we're still extracting design criteria. But we do know a couple of other things. So what should the account consist of, for instance? So it should follow the system's life cycle. which means that so we have 3 stages, so before, during, and after, basically. And at different points in time, you can ask different questions about the algorithmic system. And I'm just going to show you the very basic questions, like the most elementary level of questions that you can ask about these systems. So at the elementary level of, prior to using a system or designing a system, you can ask questions. I call these the 5, are there 5? I think 6 W questions. So who is developing this? Developing the system? Where is the system being developed? What is it that the organization or organizations set out to create? Why is this needed? When is the system situated? And whom will it affect? So, and in the next phase, so while you're developing the system, you can ask like an infinite number of how questions. So how does it work? How can we make sure that it stays fair? And when you're kind of wrapping up your system, you're supposed to reflect, right? So where do we come from and where do we want to go with this? So whence does the system came and whither should it go? And this sounds like really basic in a way, but this is actually like a summary of, I think, 24 pages of an infinite number of questions I've extracted from the literature. And we actually see in practice that it's actually hard to kind of keep asking these questions throughout the entire life cycle of the system. So what would it look like? Well, like I said, we don't really know, but I can show you the inspiration for it. So my colleagues at the Utrecht Data School developed DIDA, Data Ethics Decision Aid. And this is basically an A0 poster. It's huge. And the whole data team at a municipality can sit around this poster and they discuss it. And as they go through the poster, they tackle a lot of different questions about various themes. So it's supposed to be like a little sister to DIDA. So it's probably not going to be an app, but probably something physical, because it's really nice to actually have something tangible while you're discussing all of these abstract and ephemeral concepts. So that's it for me. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them during the Q&A.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I have tons of follow-up questions, and I'm sure there will be many more to follow. This was very interesting. Thank you. I'll reserve my questions for later, and we'll move on now to Lucas, because we are very honored also to have Lucas Evers on our panel. He's trained in fine arts and teaching at Maastricht Academy of Fine Arts and Design, and he's also studied politics at the University of Amsterdam. He's now the head of the program of the MAKE group of the Bach Foundation for Technology and Society in Amsterdam, where he is involved in many projects that concern this interaction between arts and science, from arts and biotechnologies to arts and robotics, to arts and the digital transformation. At Bach, he also worked on a project called Trust Me, I Am an Artist, and the Future of Emerging Art and Technologies, and many other projects. And we're very looking forward to this panel, where he will introduce different projects that have a focus on algorithmic accountability and artists. Thank you, Lucas.
Thank you for that super kind introduction, and thank you for organizing this panel. And thank you also all the other speakers so far. I will very quickly introduce the place where I work. You can go to the next slide already. I work at the next slide, please. Waag in Amsterdam. We operate at the intersection of science, technology, and the arts. And we focus on technology as an instrument of social change, guided by the values of fairness, openness, and inclusivity. And by the way, the Fairphone that was shown earlier is a project that originates in the building I'm sitting here. So looking at code and algorithms, we look at that as a result of culture, and therefore bias is always part of it. And in order to get a good view on that, we work with many stakeholders. And in this case, for this presentation, I I need to say artists are a very important compass in that research, let's say, together with citizens, because it's for the citizens' good that we do that, but also for a kind of manual research where citizens are involved in the research to understand what to code for. Can you go to the next slide? So here's where we are based, in an old city gate of Amsterdam. We have a lot of labs there. We work with 60 colleagues. And in that building there is an anatomical theater. Can you go to the next slide? Where this painting is made by famous Dutch painter Rembrandt, where you can see it's a very early collaboration between the arts, Rembrandt depicting this, and sciences, the dissection of the human body. And for us, that's a metaphor that we still take on. The dissection of technologies is very important for us to get a better understanding. So, next. Yeah. Art and accountability in the context of AI. What does art do? So I collected a very small number of artworks that I'm going to run you through and then leave you with a few questions that are conveyed by these artworks. So first, a work by Michel Zeraviv, but also he worked together with another few colleagues, the normalizing machine. I would really recommend you to go to the link below and have a look at the video. What the person is doing there is that he's being watched by a computational system that records to whom he is pointing. And he's pointing at two images of previous participants that have been pointing at others. So by doing that, they teach the machine what is more normal. And that's actually what AI often does. It discriminates. It defines what we think should be normal, or where we see a kind of a bandwidth where what we think should be normal in economical terms, in societal terms, etc. Understanding what that normal is very important, I think, because the normal is also a cultural construct. It's not neutral. The artwork, is really collecting as many of those points as possible in order to really train an algorithm what is normal. So if you get in touch with him, he's gladly to help you install that artwork somewhere to collect more of these signals. Can we go to the next one? So here you see a work of Serbian artists Vladan Jolar and Kate Crawford. It's the anatomy of an AI system. We look at AI systems as something that is not material, that is neutral, that is somewhere in the cloud, but it again shows here how much it is a construct of Cartesian thinking. It is very material because it runs on big data centers that are populating urban and suburban areas, consuming even sometimes more power than a mid-sized city. So I brought this in because I think it's a very important perspective to understand the growth of these kinds of systems. Can you go to the next? Yeah, this is an interesting work that actually does similar like to normalizing machine. It's a work called Constrained Cities, made by an Italian art group called Art is Open Source. And it's actually a kind of smartwatch that you can wear that gives you little electrical signals that are not per se that pleasant when you go into urban areas where you don't belong, depending on the kind of social economical system fed by all the networks the smartwatch has access to. So income rates, all sorts of health rates that do tell you whether to belong somewhere or not. Next one, please. Yeah, unfortunately of this work, I cannot show the interactive version, but I also invite you to go to the arts page of the CPDP conference, because this is a work that is an alternative that you can use for all the Zoom rooms, the Microsoft team, the Skype rooms you're in, that uses facial recognition software to follow your facial gestures so that people can see you in an online meeting, yet you're not identifiable. It's a work by Dutch artist Martine Stig and Stef Koolman. I think it's a fantastic example of how these systems are already following us at this very moment I'm in this call, because if the connection goes down, the AI system interprets part of my face in the image so that the image the video doesn't get interrupted. So they made an artistic version thereof, also questioning things like anonymity, privacy in the way we are living nowadays in these environments. Next slide, please. Oh, it was interactive. Yeah, wow, good. I didn't remember I had put the video in there. Excavating AI, again, a work of Kate Crawford, in this case together with Trevor Pakelin. How much time do I still have? I got a message, I don't know. Yeah, okay. Yeah. This is a work of Trevor Pakelin and Kate Crawford. You have to apologize. I apologize for not knowing the exact system, but they found out about a big AI program that was fed by billions of facial images scraped from the internet, trying to teach that AI how to recognize certain characteristics. And it's very interesting to see a very well-known good actress being labeled as hermaphrodite, or someone simply in a bathing suit as kleptomaniac. And a toy being recognized instead of the black child holding it. It's interesting to see these kinds of biases and how they get into the system, which is interpreted by the artists here. Next slide, please. Yeah, quickly, this is also an interesting project that was the winner of the Stars Prize of, I believe, 2019. It's a sound scrambling adaptation that you can put on your Google Pod that gives you a lot of advices and that scrambles your voice when you don't want to get advices, and Google or these types of machinery is listening in whether you name any brand names so that they can bomb you with advertising. Project Alias is fantastic. It works, and you can get workshops of the guys who made this. Next slide, please. Here it goes into other sorts of the use of artistic AI. It's a work by Piera, who's an artist in residence here at Waag, and she's using vision recognition to look at the plant mouths that are underneath plant leaves and has that interpreted by a lip reader, but also by lip reading software in order to see whether AI can be used to understand whether plants want to convey any messages to us, for instance, about climate change. I don't think they will take the effort to give us meaningful messages because we're not taking really well care of them. Next slide, please. But it's an interesting other kind of artistic use of AI. And if you look at this panel, the combination of art and accountability in AI, it's also a question of where do we use AI for, than to optimize systems that are meant for economic extraction. Shouldn't we think of how to make algorithms for inclusion instead of exclusion? So also looking at the art's role in this context, I also want to ask, what has it taken us as society to turn to the arts to get a better ethical view on why we use AI for? It's interesting, and there I want to close, that you can go to another conference that will happen in Dresden, I think in June, which is about querying AI and about the coming out of smart machines. I think it's a very interesting question there to juxtapose what you can use AI for. So there I want to conclude actually with a few questions. Maybe we still have some little bit of time left. I would like to ask, for instance, to Maranke, what are the exact algorithmic socio-economic? Yeah.
Thank you so much for the two speakers. This was really, really nice, and it really shows how much important this topic is. And actually, I get home this question on what are we using AI for, right? And I think that this connects very well from the point of view of Maranke, no, where it can help maybe municipalities, but at the same time it really pushes like to the question on like what are the rights that society and citizens have for this, but also the other side, like it shows and connects very well with what Peter also was saying before about how we can use AI to have as a pharmacon, no, like as a solution that we highlight the problems that these systems have, and yeah, and how it could be like maybe like also a problem, no. Thank you so much for your contributions. Moving on now, we have actually two other speakers with us to close the cluster, and we are very excited because we can have with us also today many artists, and one of them is Piera Riccio. And Piera, she's originally from Italy. And hi, Piera, nice to see you here. And she's a student from the Politecnico of Torino and Eurocom Telecom Paris. And her main interest is actually to see what are these artistic potentialities of artificial intelligence. But at the same time, she also tries to reason about these humanitarian and more ethical risks that this may have. And she's also currently a research assistant at the FELD project in Oslo Metropolitan University. And at the same time, she's also affiliated at the Meta Lab Center at Harvard University. So, Piera, the floor is yours. I think that today you will be presenting AI Oracle. Can you explain us a little bit more about this?
Yes. Okay, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm very excited about this. I think you introduced me, so I can start with the presentation. So what I'm going to talk about today is I titled the presentation "A Way to Fight Discriminations in AI," because I'm going to talk about a project or two projects, let's say, that I started with a colleague of mine, a friend of mine, because we wanted to communicate to people that are maybe not in the academic field the risks of AI when it comes to bias and discrimination. And we thought that art is a good way of communicating these risks. So first of all, I would start with this quotation that you can read in the screen. It's a quotation from Lee from Stanford University, which is focused on the fact that we should give to artificial intelligence the same values that we have. And I think it's important to start this speech with this quotation, because what I think lacks a little bit in the education of engineers nowadays, and I say it because, as Eduard says, I am an engineer, I'm taking this master in artificial intelligence. I think we're not really educated on what are the risks of what we study and what we do. And it's important because it can have a lot of bad consequences on our society. So I'm going to talk about this collective, art collective that we founded in 2017. It's a collective, it's an inclusive art collective that right now has people coming from different places of the world. You can see them highlighted in the picture. So what is our, let's say, mission? Our mission is to illuminate people, as I said, on the discriminatory potentials of AI. I founded this collective together with Shirley Ogolla. We met at Harvard University in 2017 because we were interns at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society, and we were both working on ethics and artificial intelligence, and we felt the need of communicating these risks more. Actually, Shirley is doing a PhD basically focused on these topics, so it's good to have also the academic, let's say, approach. This, for example, is a paper that she wrote, and there is, let's say, our starting point. It has been our starting point for our work. So it's important for me to say that we started from a very, let's say, academic path. Let's go on with the journey. So we have had, I think, quite an interesting journey, considering that we both did this kind of artwork in parallel with what we do in normal life. We started, as I said, in 2017, we founded the collective, and in 2018, we had the opportunity of exposing the first version of our installation called the AI Oracle. In that you can see, it's not really beautiful, maybe because we self-produced this installation, but we were super proud of it. We exposed it in Republica, which is this digital festival in Berlin. After this, we won a grant from the Ministry of Science and Education in Germany, and we had the opportunity of making a second exhibition in 2019 in the Futurium, which is a museum in Berlin. So the concept of AI Oracle is having the visitors engage with the questions of discrimination personally. So basically, the visitors are asked to enter our installation, and there's like a fake scanning process. And after this fake scanning, an AI, which is fake, it's just simulated in this installation, this AI will present them a future job. So the future job does not exist, of course, but what we wanted to we wanted the visitors to engage with the possibility of being discriminated for some reasons, maybe their sex, maybe their religion, maybe the color of the skin, it can be many factors, and we wanted them to feel it on their skin. So I'm going to have now a very short video that shows a little bit how the installation was. This is the external look of the installation. Once we could, let's say, we had more money to produce it, so we could afford better material and better lights. And this is the external looking. But when you go inside, basically, this is what happens. I have this short video. Maybe you can go a bit farther just to cut a little bit. I don't hear the sound of the video. Okay, anyway, what is happening in this moment is that there should be a voice that unfortunately we cannot hear, that is simulating the scanning process, as I was saying, and in the end, the girl will be proposed a future job. So I will go on now with the next slide. Right now, we are working on another installation because we have been approached by the Goethe Institute Australia, which asked us to basically produce a new installation, which they have funded. This installation has a similar, let's say, concept as AI Oracle, but we have now decided to focus on a different aspect, because in the first installation we focused on discrimination in the working context. We now want to focus on discriminations in general and on how important it is the image when it comes to being to have a discrimination on us. This is, let's say, our first prototype. We haven't built it yet. We're working on it right now. We have also included in the job other artists that I have studied in this slide. These are other images just to give you an idea of how the installation will look like, and it will also have a documentary. And our mission is always to engage the visitors with these ethical questions. And I've finished, and I thank you for the attention.
Thank you so much, Piera, for showing this. I think that is one of the main problems that we see in society, that people do not feel what that's when you are discriminated, no? And exposing everyone to this experience, I think that it can be very enriching to help people to put them to their shoes. You also mentioned one very important thing at the beginning, that we are not that much educated into the risks of AI. And this leads very well to our next speaker, which we are very happy to have with us. So thank you so much. We have with us Vincent Rioux, and Vincent is the head of the digital division of the National Superior School of Fine Arts in Paris. Since 2010, and today he is going to talk a little bit about the role of education at the intersectionality between accountability and art. Vincent, the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, let's go then. So I first like to warmly thank you, Eduard, for offering me the opportunity to talk about my experience as a teacher of, let's say, digital technologies in the School of Fine Arts of Paris, like you said, the Beaux-Arts de Paris, a quite old Academy of Fine Arts. And I'm grateful and honored to conclude this discussion. I should also point out that I'm not an AI specialist per se, but I do know what computer code and signal processing are. Well, so there is, as everyone will easily recognize here, a quite powerful international trend towards the design and use of artificial intelligence in potentially all fields of human activity right now. So I will try to focus on art pedagogy, which is already quite a huge endeavor. Thanks, Eduard. And I might go through some kind of convoluted tracks. And I believe that I can only be very, very subjective and particularly non-exhaustive during this exercise, but I'll try it. I would like to underline a few global critiques concerning our algorithmically inclined society, especially looking at a few blind spots, and conclude with some more specific art and pedagogical experiences. So I would say responsibility in its dual concept seemed to be rooted on a, shall I say, convoluted in the many shapes and the rather gigantic graph of the internet, especially when with Marshall McLuhan, for example, we might be seduced by the idea that it might be well shape and connect all human minds in one way or another. Back in the days, Norbert Wiener, in his famous book, The Human Use of Human Beings, launched signals of alarm, which seem pretty adequate for our present time. And despite the warnings emanating from the great mathematician, he was not listened that much, maybe because he was mainly concerned by analog feedback-driven control systems. And it looks like we are now facing a period of abyssal doubt. Please, next slide. And by the way, talking about Wiener, I take the opportunity to mention this collective book, which was published recently in 2019, by John Brockman, and seemed to me like a very good summary of what directions and trends the research and thinking on AI might take, and what is at stake. Some pages are at the same time both fascinating and frightening. It unveils a world of strange thoughts concerning the future of humanity, and is, I guess, a good introduction to the concept of generalized AI, for example. If I understood it well, in some way you could see a generalized AI or artificial general intelligence as a being, and probably as an artist too. But we are far, far, far from being there yet. But now, if I ask you to stop watching your screen, close your eyes, and think about the union of an avocado and an armchair, and well, you can actually ask it to do it from a neural network perspective. So that's what it looks like. You can open your eyes now, but that's not me. Yeah, that's thanks. Okay, so that's the that's coming from the Open AI platform. I guess some of you knows about that. So it's called DALI project. It does not exactly look like those somehow crazy AI generated hallucinations, but it's quite interesting. And this point, it should be clear that basically these algorithms just do what we expect them to do. They are generating, in that sense, quite clean, regular, normally shaped, perfectly designed images. But one thing we should always remember, whatever they produce, is that at the present time, generating this type of image is very costly. So very fast, because things are fast. So I would just wanted to show you this image I took from information about the Bitcoin, which is clearly a different technology, but quite interesting and connected to our discussion because it's very close to jurisdiction and cryptography, of course. But the Bitcoin itself, so the most famous blockchain system is producing something like 22 megatons of CO2 per year. So it's like a city per itself, like Vegas or Hamburg. And I searched for AI, and I actually couldn't really find figures, at least with my Google, let's say, know-how. And apparently, I'm not exactly the only one. So I guess there's something here. So I found that on the European Parliament, the question was raised, calling carbon footprint of artificial intelligence. I think there's something big here. And I guess that's really something hard that will be worked out in the next years to come. We really should have that. I have to be quick. I think I saw that a previous speaker talked about the work of Kate Crawford and Vlad and Joler. Here it's a so-called project called Anatomy of AI. And the whole picture shows the interconnected system that AI brings us. I think it was really interesting. And if you focus on small parts, I don't have time to see everything about that. But there is something about, of course, the economical implications of AI system and energy and water consumption of AI training, for example. So we should, but one important thing is that we should anyway remember that, as Mr. Dyson remarkably noticed, our brain is not a computer. So analogia didn't disappear. An interesting path, by the way, is to keep a link between these analog practices and digital ones. If I take the example of photography, this is quite clear that a lot of art schools could not afford to keep their analog lab and naturally switch to digital printing. This is not a light decision to make, and I can testify that the young generation of artists I do meet in the school are often very much interested by analog mediums too, using photographic or video films, not to mention, of course, drawing, painting, and sculpting, of course. Okay, but let's come back to the subject of responsibility. I think I will skip the next slide. Sorry. Yeah, I skip that one. This is interesting, but I don't have time. I wanted to show you because I wanted to go through three paradoxes. I think the paradox, let's say, pedagogical responsibility, which I would call making users. but I will come back maybe to that. The second paradox will be technical and theoretical responsibility, meaning that no one knows exactly why neural networks succeed so well or fail. And this is another problem. And the third paradox that I began to develop is the ecological responsibility. And this is some kind of ultimate recursivity. For example, we can really say that machine learning demands a lot of energy and thus produces a large amount of CO2. But at the same time, it is presented as the ultimate way to fix the energy consumption of the planet through smart grids, etc. So it's quite interesting. And yeah, I was showing this image of a workshop we did with artist Daniela De Paolis and neuroscientist Stephen Whitmarsh. The idea here is to capture the brain waves, like alpha waves, and basically to produce music or images and to send them to the moon, thanks to this kind of antenna. This is real. We did it. And it comes back and gives some images. But first, we make experiment on our brain. And in my opinion, this is a good way also to approach artificial intelligence, is first to understand how our intelligence is working, which is we don't exactly know yet. Okay, and yeah, so we're making experiments with small devices that you can hold in your hand and understand how the neurons are working into our brain. That's all for Stephen, and I will last talk about an experience we did with a mathematician, young mathematician, which is a PhD still, but he's working on the math behind the neural network and trying to understand how these things are working, because as you see, it's not easy, but they are doing also experiments with artists. So it's really art and science thing. And here they are, I'm showing some drawings they have been doing with an AI. So the AI is implicated into the drawing thing. So I think the AI is the blue. And this guy is called Vivien Cabane, and I think we will have we will organize some workshop with him in the very near future at our school. That's the end of my talk.
Thank you so much, Vincent. This has been very enlightening, and now I do understand that I need an avocado chair in my place. Jokes aside, thank you so much for this. We have very interesting questions in the chat room. I would invite the panelists to have a look at them at some point, because I think that our colleague Francine de Hesne has pointed out like something very interesting that I think that it could be very nice for Piera, Riccio, but also like for the apps formation, no, and with this Pharmacon. But also I think that there are questions for Lucas. So please do engage with the speakers after the panel and also afterwards. For us, in our side, we have like one very quick question to all the panelists, because this has been like very, very enriching, and for CPDP this is something new. Like we have not seen that much of art in this context. We want to ask again the panelists, if you could write a tweet about the following question, it would be really helpful for us. So we are going to ask you, what is for you the most critical role that art can play in an increasingly algorithmic society? Let's go back to our first cluster. Yeah, we will have sure. So we will have back the speakers Peter and Fiona, and we will ask them this following question. And at the same time, like we invite the other speakers to start thinking about this critical role that art can play in society, you know, because as some questions they put here, like they really like it's not that clear like how art can inform and can help in a way. And that is something that we are very much interested to take the opportunity of this panel to go forward and have like a dialogue and establish a better discussion with different artists and also experts in this area. Peter, Fiona, welcome back.
Thanks. Good to be back.
Did you hear the question?
I did. Yes.
Wonderful. So, what's for you this role that arts can play in such an algorithmic society?
Okay, I'm going to try and keep this my answer to about 10 seconds because I would say it's to create some sort of like perceptive jolt. If you think if algorithms curate information, limit the experiences that perhaps we're exposed to, I would say that the role of art is to give some sort of perceptuary jolt so that we encounter something new.
Thank you. Fiona?
Back to just a comment Lucas made about how these products and systems are, they're not born in a vacuum, and they're actually a product of the culture that they're developed in. So I think the introduction of art to say engineering and computer science context really helps kind of diversify and complicate the logic within which these systems are developed.
Diversify and complicate, which we assume is something positive somehow.
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Fiona. Now we're going to ask the second cluster speakers, and we're going to have with us Lucas and also Maranke to ask the same question. So what is it exactly that we believe that it is important to have? What is the role? I remember that Maranke was stressing that maybe the art is not that clear, for instance, in her project, but because sometimes we are always busy in our own disciplines, that we have a hard time into understanding that. Let's see if after this panel she believes otherwise.
Maybe I can go first then?
Yeah, Lucas. Hi, Lucas.
Oh, there. Maranke, please, you go first.
Ladies.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I really agree with everything that's been said already, especially with what Fiona's been saying. I actually have like this little tile here. Not sure if you can see it, but it says, algorithmic systems are not rocket science. They do not operate in a vacuum. And I think that really kind of captures it. So I think for me, what art really brings to algorithmic accountability is questioning, critiquing, raising awareness, enhancing algorithmic literacy about these socio-technical systems.
Apart from Blau Delft, nice tiles for sure. But yes, thank you. That is very insightful. Thank you so much. Lucas.
Well, art is good in understanding the aesthetics related to the ethics. I think also aesthetics understood not only as beauty, but also the dark side of it. So helping to de-black box algorithms. Because a lot of the algorithms that we think are not creating a positive relation to society are often the commercial ones that we don't know the code of. So yeah, I would say that.
Thank you, Lucas. Well, we will have the director prepare the last cluster, Piera and also Vincent, to ask them the question. Also, what I see recurrently is that there is this opposite sides. We have the beauty and the dark and the ugly. We have the transparent and we have the opaque. And many times I think that actually this is really necessary, like to shed the light where there is dark, and also to confront some people about the darkness side of it, that we think, and that is very enriching. So somehow, like, it is maybe the yin yang version of it, like where we can really like mix a little bit like these two perspectives, so that we can inform better this and we can make better decisions. And now we have the last speakers with us. Piera, for you as an artist, because it is so interesting that you are taking this role, like what do you think you and your art can bring to society?
So I think I will be very short, but I think art it must have the role of expression of human feeling, related also to the historical context that we live. So I truly believe that AI and art are an important field to pursue right now, because they are somehow the expression of the revolutions that we're living. And yeah, algorithms cannot express human emotions. So
thank you, Piera. Vincent, what is it for you, this critical role that arts can play?
Yeah, I think I get the same kind of feeling as Piera, as I understood, is that maybe the most critical role would be to help us understand what it is to be human, simply put. And of course, we can keep inviting everybody to play with numbers. I mean, there's no problem with that. It's fun. So we keep being human while playing with numbers. Why not? And putting back maybe algorithms and computing into culture, if as this French philosopher called Simondon warned us, is that if techniques get outside of culture, this is dangerous. But as long as we get it into the broad word as culture, this is okay, and it will help us to stay human and not being used by other humans too. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vincent. We will close the panel asking also the moderators what do they think that this can bring. So I will invite Aurelia, if you can very shortly share your thoughts on this.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think a lot has already been touched upon. I think very much part of our motivation, as you already also explained at the beginning, was really to see how much not only academic research, but really the art can shed light on these practices and capture these feelings that we have and these anxieties that we have also towards these technologies. So I'm very glad this panel came together. I thank everyone for being here with an excellent talk. I'm sad we couldn't talk about all the topics that I also wanted to cover, especially also on accountability. But I hope there is room for more discussions and now that the connections are made.
Thank you, Aurelia. Christoph.
Yes, I want to keep it short. So for me, I kind of agree with everything that has been said. I think art certainly has also the role of keeping AI companies or designers accountable to a certain extent. So I think accountability and AI is not only about keep holding those accountable that design systems through civil society, but I think artists can have a critical function and a critical role in reflecting, questioning, mirroring some of these tendencies. And like already, I want to thank all of you, all the speakers. I found it very, very interesting, and I learned a lot. And I really liked the panel, and was happy that we can hold it like that.
Thank you so much, Christoph. So just to close, what we see is really the expression of diversity. And I think that this is something that we are very much looking forward to do, to be much more diverse. in what we do in every day. So we thank you, everyone, and definitely let's stay in touch. Let's continue the dialogue, and let's continue pursuing to have more arte in our lives.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great, thanks.